Imagine yourself under a starry night sky, the warmth of a campfire on your face, and the soft crackle of burning wood in your ears. In this calm circle of light, we often find it easier to ponder the deeper questions. Have you ever wondered why some relationships empower us while others drain us? Around this virtual campfire, we're going to explore that very question. Our guide for tonight's journey is Eric Berne's classic book, Games People Play: The Psychology of Human Relationships. A 1964 work that shines a light on the hidden patterns in our social interactions. In the glow of the fire, we'll talk about the subtle games people play with each other. Those unconscious patterns and power struggles that can undercut genuine connection. We'll explore Berne's concept of different ego states inside each of us and learn how understanding them can bring clarity and calm to our relationships. We'll reflect on the philosophy of authenticity, drawing wisdom from thinkers like Carl Jung and Jean-Paul Sartre about being true to ourselves. And, like seasoned storytellers, we'll discuss how to break the cycle of unhealthy interactions, borrowing a bit of Stoic insight on self-control and resilience along the way. So get comfortable by the fire, relax, and let's begin this introspective journey together. Picture a simple, everyday scene. Two co-workers are chatting, and one says with a forced sigh, "I guess I'll have to finish this project all by myself. Again." The other, feeling a twinge of guilt, immediately offers to help, even though they're swamped with their own work. On the surface, it's just an offer and acceptance of help. But beneath the surface, something else might be going on. Eric Berne would call this a psychological game. In his terms, a game is a recurring pattern of interaction with a hidden motive or payoff. One person subtly guilt trips, poor me, and the other rescues, or perhaps one person nags while the other withdraws. These patterns repeat over and over, leaving everyone feeling unsatisfied and drained. Berne noted that pastimes and games are substitutes for the real living of real intimacy. In other words, we often unconsciously choose these familiar maneuvers instead of honest, vulnerable communication. And as a result, we miss out on genuine connection. What do these games look like in daily life? They can take countless forms. It might be a power struggle in a romantic relationship. For instance, two partners arguing about who's right about trivial things, when the hidden motive is that each wants to feel respected and in control. Or consider the classic "yes, but" scenario. One person keeps asking for advice or help, but every solution the other offers is met with, "Yes, but that won't work," because the hidden payoff is that the advice giver grows frustrated and the asker gets to play the defeated one who tried everything to no avail. Another common game is guilt tripping. A parent might say to an adult child, "It's fine, I'll just be here alone, don't worry about me," with a martyr-like tone that sounds self-sacrificing, but is meant to make the child feel guilty and call more often. In each of these cases, there's what's being said on the surface, and then there's an ulterior message underneath. The true desires, for reassurance, for power, for attention, are hidden behind moves and counter-moves. We engage in these games not out of malice, but often because we aren't fully aware of why we're doing it. They're habits born from our past experiences and unspoken fears. This is where psychology meets the campfire tale. Our unconscious motives are like the shadows dancing around the fire. Renowned psychologist Carl Jung believed we all have a shadow self, the parts of us we hide or deny, often even from ourselves. These might be desires, insecurities, or anger we've pushed out of sight because we consider them unacceptable. But just because they're hidden doesn't mean they stay quiet. In fact, Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In the context of Berne's games, that means if we don't become aware of our hidden feelings and drives, we'll keep finding ourselves in the same draining relationship patterns and wonder why it keeps happening to us. The shadow has a way of slipping into our interactions, whether we realize it or not. For example, someone who craves affection but fears rejection might unconsciously play the hard-to-get game or constantly test their partner's love with needless conflict. Their shadow fear of abandonment is indirectly controlling their actions. Jung's idea of the shadow self helps explain why these games have such power. The real conflict is often within ourselves. The power-hungry boss who belittles his employees may actually carry a deep, perhaps unconscious, insecurity that he isn't respected, a shadow of self-doubt. So he overcompensates by exerting authority in petty ways. The friend who always plays the victim, always on the losing end of some drama, might be grappling with a shadow feeling of unworthiness, seeking validation through others' sympathy. By understanding that we all have these hidden sides, we can start to feel more empathy, both for ourselves and others. It's not that people want to play games that hurt each other. It's that sometimes our unmet needs and fears, our shadows, drive us to seek relief in roundabout ways. So, what can we do about it? The first step is simply to recognize the game. Around our campfire, honesty is the light that dispels shadow. Start noticing if a certain uncomfortable scenario keeps repeating in your relationships. That's a clue you might be caught in a game. Do you often end up feeling like the unappreciated one, the one who always gives more? Or do you frequently feel others just don't care enough about you, prompting you to test them? Such patterns might signal an unconscious script at play. When you catch it, gently call it out, even if only to yourself at first. Acknowledge the real feeling. I think I'm not actually upset about the dishes being left dirty, the surface issue. I'm feeling ignored and I want attention. Shining this light of awareness can already start to break the spell. Remember, as soon as you see a game for what it is, it loses some of its power over you. We can choose to respond differently. We'll talk more about how to break the cycle in Chapter 4. But first, to understand these games better, we need to know the players within us, the different sides of our personality that Berne called ego states. Eric Berne had a remarkable insight. In our interactions, we seem to shift between different modes of being, almost like we have internal voices or personas that take turns running the show. He identified 3 primary ego states that we all have: the parent, the adult, and the child. These aren't literal separate personalities, but rather consistent patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that we learn as we grow up. Let's shine a light on each of these ego states so you can recognize them in yourself and others. Parent. This is the part of us that mimics authority figures, usually our own parents or caregivers, but also teachers, elders, and society at large. The parent ego state is like an internalized collection of all the instructions, rules, and attitudes we observed in adults when we were young. It often shows up in 2 flavors: the nurturing parent, comforting, caring, offering guidance, and the critical parent, judgmental, strict, saying you should or you must not. For example, if you've ever heard yourself say something to a friend or child and then thought, "Wow, I sound just like my mom/dad right now," that's your parent ego state talking. Berne succinctly noted, "Everyone carries his parents around inside of him. We carry not just their voice, but their attitudes. If your parent state is active, you might find yourself scolding someone or yourself for being late. 'This is irresponsible, you should know better.' Or alternatively, fussing over a loved one's cold with soup and blankets like a mother hen. It's that part of you that lectures, advises, or comforts, often on autopilot. Adult. Think of the adult ego state as your calm, rational self. It's the part of you that processes information objectively, like a computer, and deals with the reality of the here and now. The adult isn't influenced by the knee-jerk rules of the parent or the intense emotions of the child. It weighs options, considers consequences, and tries to come up with solutions based on facts. When you're in your adult state, you're fully present and balanced. For example, suppose a friend is upset and yelling. Your adult part will listen to the actual issue, remain relatively calm, and perhaps say, "I see you're angry. Let's talk this through." It's not patronizing like a critical parent, nor is it reactive like a hurt child. It's steady. The adult ego state is crucial in situations that require problem solving. It's like the clear-headed mediator between the parent and child voices. If you spill coffee on your shirt in the morning, it's your adult that thinks, "Okay, let me grab a towel and another shirt, no big deal." It deals with the situation practically, without self-blame or panic. Child. The child ego state is the echo of your own childhood, the feelings, needs, and behaviors you learned as a young one. It's the source of your natural emotions and creativity. There's the free, or natural child side, playful, curious, joyful, and spontaneous, and the adapted child side, the part that reacts to the world with obedience, defiance, fear, or guilt based on childhood experiences. You see the child state when someone bursts out laughing at a silly joke. That's their fun-loving natural child. Or when a person sulks because they got criticized. That's perhaps their hurt, adapted child feeling shame or anger. If you've ever felt small or reverted to a younger mindset under stress, like wanting to stomp your feet or run and hide, that's your child taking over. For instance, imagine you're getting feedback at work. Your adult listens to the useful points, but your child might simultaneously feel embarrassed or angry, thinking, "It's not fair," or "I always mess up, I'm not good enough." The child carries our vulnerabilities and impulses. It's that voice that might whine, "I don't want to do this," when faced with a boring adult task, or that wants to eat ice cream for dinner on a whim. It's innocent and emotional. Now, here's the interesting part. In any conversation or conflict, these ego states interact. Have you ever seen an exchange like this? One partner says, "Why can't you ever be on time? You're so irresponsible." That's a critical parent tone. The other partner then pouts and murmurs, "Whatever, you're not my boss. Stop nagging me," sounding like a defensive child. Suddenly, the first person might escalate to a full-on parental lecture, and the second might throw a childish tantrum or give the silent treatment. Both have effectively left their rational adult selves behind. One has become the parent, the other the child, and they're locked in a toxic game of parent chiding and child rebelling. This can happen internally too. You make a mistake, and your inner parent berates you, "How stupid of me," while your child feels hurt or ashamed. Meanwhile, your adult, who would say, "It's okay, we'll fix it," gets sidelined in the chaos. Recognizing these states in action is like being able to step out of the scene and observe the play instead of being swept up in it. When you notice, "I'm talking to my spouse like a critical parent right now," you gain the power to stop and change your tone. You might take a breath and re-engage as an adult, calmer, more respectful. Or if you realize, "I'm reacting as my child, feeling attacked and defensive," you can self-soothe and try to bring your adult back to respond more constructively. The magic is that awareness gives you a choice. You're no longer just a puppet of whatever ego state got triggered. This idea aligns wonderfully with ancient wisdom. The Stoic philosophers, much like Berne's adult state, valued reason, self-awareness, and emotional discipline above knee-jerk reactions. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Stoic, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In our context, outside events could be someone else's harsh words, or the temptations and stresses around us. Our mind is how we choose which ego state to respond from. Do we let the outside event, say someone's rude comment, drag out our angry child or punitive parent? Or do we exercise our power over our mind by staying in adult mode and responding with measured thought? The Stoics would advise a pause, a moment of reflection, before reacting. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters, taught Epictetus, another Stoic sage. And indeed, Berne's theory gives us a framework for how we react. We can strive to react from the adult ego state, with clarity and calm, rather than from a wounded child or an overzealous parent. Practicing this kind of self-awareness is a form of mental strength. It's not easy. Our child and parent states can be very powerful, especially if provoked, but with time we get better at it. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said that most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. In modern words, the strongest person is the one who controls themselves, rather than controlling or being controlled by others. Understanding your ego states is a step toward that self-mastery. Next time you feel an argument spiraling, try to identify the roles at play. Who's the parent? Who's the child? Gently nudge yourself and even the other person back toward an adult-adult conversation. That's where real communication happens. By doing so, you honor both yourself and them as equals in the here and now, rather than reenacting old scripts. Why go through all this reflection and analysis? The answer is authenticity. Living and relating without the masks and maneuvers that undermine genuine connection. Eric Berne believed that the whole point of identifying games and ego states was to help people move towards authentic, honest interactions. Think of authenticity as the warm, steady fire at the core of our being. When we're authentic, we're real with ourselves and others, not playing a role or trying to manipulate an outcome. Berne contrasted true intimacy and spontaneity with the artificiality of games, noting that, for certain fortunate people, there is something which rises above the programming of the past, and that is spontaneity, and something that is more rewarding than games, and that is intimacy. In short, when we drop the games, we gain the possibility of intimacy, a closeness built on truth rather than pretense, and the freedom to be spontaneous and fully ourselves. But being authentic is not always easy. Society often subtly encourages the opposite. We learn early on to wear masks, to be the good child, the tough guy, the people pleaser, etc. Sometimes these roles stick with us into adulthood, long after they've served their purpose. Have you ever caught yourself acting in a social setting? Maybe laughing at a joke you didn't actually find funny? Or saying, "I'm fine" when you're not? Or playing dumb to avoid conflict? We all do this to some extent. It's part of social navigation. But when it becomes our default way of being, we lose touch with our genuine selves. We might become so used to playing a role in our relationships, whether it's the caretaker, the hero, the victim, or the rebel, that we feel trapped and unseen for who we really are. Existential philosophy, especially the ideas of Jean-Paul Sartre, dives deep into this tension between roles and true self. Sartre talked about the concept of bad faith, mauvaise foi in French, which is basically what happens when we deceive ourselves. when we play a role or adopt values just to fit in or avoid responsibility. It's living inauthentically. For example, consider a person who hates their job but smiles every day, saying, "living the dream," because they can't admit to themselves they want something different, or someone who stays in an unhappy relationship but pretends everything's perfect because they fear change. Sartre would say these people are in bad faith. They're not being honest with themselves about their freedom to choose a different path. They're acting out a script that society or their past has handed to them instead of writing their own. Sartre famously said, "Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." In other words, like it or not, we are free to make choices, and we bear responsibility for those choices. With freedom comes the anxiety of knowing that we, not our circumstances, not other people, ultimately author our lives through our decisions. It can be scary, which is why it's sometimes tempting to hide behind roles. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. Or to blame others. I behave this way because they make me. But living that way diminishes us. It's playing a part in a play we didn't write. Sartre distilled a key idea about freedom in a memorable quote. "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." Think about that. We all have things happen to us, good and bad, beyond our control. But authenticity and freedom lie in how we respond and what we do next. Do we repeat the patterns passed down to us without question? Or do we consciously choose our path? When Berne calls for honest, non-manipulative relationships, he is essentially calling us to exercise this freedom. It means not defaulting to the games and roles that might feel familiar. It means sometimes doing the harder thing, being vulnerable, admitting fears or needs openly, and allowing others to truly see us. It's saying, "I felt hurt when you canceled our plans," instead of playing a game of cold revenge or guilt tripping. It's admitting, "I'm scared you'll leave me," instead of unconsciously acting out jealousy or testing your partner's love. Authenticity can be frightening because it strips away our defenses. It's just us, out in the open. No calculated moves, no winning or losing, just real expression and listening. Yet, it's also liberating. When you show up as your authentic self, you invite others to do the same. The relationships that form from this openness are deeply satisfying because you know the other person is connecting with the real you, not a mask you're wearing. To cultivate authenticity, it helps to reflect. Where in life am I wearing a mask or playing a role? Perhaps at work you pretend to agree with everyone to avoid conflict, playing the people-pleaser game. Or with family, you always act like the responsible one who never needs help, playing the martyr or hero. Maybe with friends, you always crack jokes even when you're sad, because you're the cheerful one. Once you identify these, ask yourself gently, what am I afraid of if I show my true feelings or thoughts? That fear points to the game or pattern you might be stuck in. It could be fear of rejection, fear of losing status, or fear of hurting someone's feelings. Recognizing it gives you a chance to challenge it. Here, the wisdom of psychologist Viktor Frankl resonates strongly. Frankl survived the horrors of a concentration camp and wrote about finding meaning and authenticity even in the worst conditions. He observed that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. No matter what life has dealt us, we maintain the freedom to choose our attitude and actions. In everyday terms, this means we get to choose whether to live in truth or in pretense, to act out of love or out of fear. Authenticity is a daily choice, sometimes a hard one, but it is always available to us. Frankel's insight reminds us that even if we've been hurt or taught to play games, what's been done to us, we still have the power to change our path, what we do with it. Berne's philosophy aligns with this. He believed people can change the scripts they live by. We aren't doomed to keep playing out the same tired dramas. By becoming aware of the games and ego states, we can consciously opt out of destructive patterns and instead engage in what he called real intimacy. It's the kind of relationship where both people are present as their true adult selves, with their child's warmth and curiosity alive but not in control, and with their parents' caring guidance but not dominating. It's honest and kind at the same time. Authenticity in relationships means you say what you mean, with respect. You listen with an open heart, and you allow others to do the same without jumping into a role to manipulate the outcome. It's mutual and it's free. Existentialists like Sartre and psychologists like Jung, who encouraged individuation, becoming your true self, both champion this authentic life. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That journey, becoming your true self, often involves unlearning the games and roles you picked up to cope with life. It means embracing your freedom to choose a new way of being, aligned with your genuine values and feelings. And yes, it's a privilege, because authenticity leads to a richer, more meaningful life. Around our campfire, as we talk frankly, we're already practicing a form of authenticity, exploring real feelings and ideas that matter to us. The next step is to carry that spirit into our daily interactions. Before we conclude our fireside evening, let's gather some practical insights on how to break out of the games for good and nurture authenticity in our lives. By now, we've thrown quite a bit of wood on the fire of understanding. We can see the games for what they are, we recognize our ego states in action, and we appreciate the value of authenticity. The question becomes, how do we actually change our interactions for the better? It's time to get practical. Breaking the cycle of unproductive games and moving towards healthier relationships is a gradual process, but it begins with conscious effort and small changes. Here are some practical steps and reflections, like guiding stars, to help you navigate out of the old patterns. 1. Build awareness of patterns. Change starts with seeing. Make it a habit to observe your interactions, almost like an outside witness. When you feel an interaction draining you or devolving into familiar frustration, pause and ask, what role am I playing right now? What role is the other person playing? Identify if you've slipped into parent or child mode, or if a known game dynamic is emerging, e.g., the blame game, the martyr game, the yes but game. This mindful step itself is powerful. As we noted before, naming the game diffuses it. You might even journal about repeated incidents to spot patterns. Recognizing, this is the same pattern as last time, transforms the situation from a baffling emotional storm into a solvable puzzle. It moves you from inside the drama to slightly outside it, where you have more control. 2. Pause and engage the adult. When you notice a trigger, perhaps you feel yourself getting angry or anxious or ready to launch into a familiar script, take a deep breath. Literally, pause for a moment. In that brief space, remind yourself that you have a choice. The Stoics used techniques like counting to 10 or examining one's initial impression to avoid rash reactions. Modern psychology suggests similar tactics. Take a breath, maybe even physically step away for a minute if possible. This is you giving your adult ego state a chance to step in front. Think of it as calling a timeout in a game, so a wiser coach, your adult self, can give guidance. Ask yourself, What outcome do I really want here? If the true desire is mutual understanding or respect, your adult can help steer towards that, rather than falling into the automatic win-lose moves of a game. As Viktor Frankl noted, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. This idea, attributed to Frankl, beautifully encapsulates the value of a pause. Use that space to choose a response, not just a reaction. 3. Practice honest communication. This is the courageous part. Speak truthfully and directly about what you feel or need, instead of using the game strategy. It might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're not used to it. For example, instead of the coworker saying with a sigh, "I'll just do it all myself," hoping the other will feel guilty and help, a direct approach would be, "I'm feeling overwhelmed with this project. Could you help me finish it? I'd really appreciate it." No hidden barbs, no guilt traps, just an honest expression of feeling and a clear request. Likewise, instead of snapping at a friend, "You never invite me to anything, I guess I don't matter," try saying, "I miss hanging out with you. Could we plan something soon?" It might sound simple, but these straightforward, authentic statements break the cycle of games by refusing to play. You're putting your real self out there. Yes, it risks rejection or awkwardness, but it also gives the other person a clear opportunity to respond with their authentic self. Many times, you'll find people respond positively to honesty. It's like a breath of fresh air. Even if they don't, you can take heart that you acted with integrity. 4. Set boundaries and exit the game. Not all games can be fixed by your efforts alone. Sometimes the other party might keep trying to play. In those cases, healthy boundaries are your friend. If you sense someone is baiting you into an old pattern, maybe a relative starts the familiar criticism that always ends in shouting, or a friend keeps playing victim expecting you to rescue, you can gently refuse to participate. You might calmly say, "I don't want to argue. Let's talk about this openly or take a break." Or, "I empathize with you, but I also need to take care of myself, so I can't engage in this right now." You're not obliged to continue a conversation that's going in circles or turning toxic. Stoic philosophy reminds us to focus on what we can control, and you can always control your own participation and response. You cannot force someone else to stop their behavior, but you can remove the fuel by not playing your part. It's like stepping off a stage mid-play. The drama can't continue the same way without you. Setting boundaries might mean physically leaving a heated situation and revisiting it later when cooler heads prevail, or emotionally distancing yourself from someone who persistently plays hurtful games. It's not selfish to protect your own mental well-being. It's wise. 5. Cultivate empathy for yourself and others. Breaking cycles isn't about winning or proving a point. It's about healing and understanding. As you work on being more authentic, also try to see the humanity in the other person. Recall that behind every game is often a shadow, a fear, or need. If someone is acting out a game with you, consider what their hidden pain might be. This doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it can transform your anger into compassion, which helps you respond from a better place. For example, you might realize, my partner's constant nagging, critical parent, comes from their own anxiety and need for security. That understanding can help you address the real issue. Let's find ways to help you feel more secure, rather than just trading barbs. At the same time, have empathy for yourself. You'll slip up, we all do. Sometimes you'll catch yourself after you've already played part of the game. That's okay. Instead of thinking, "Ugh, I failed, I always do this," treat yourself with kindness. "I see why I reacted that way. It's an old habit. Next time, I'll try to catch it sooner." Remember Seneca's advice that life is a learning process. He said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." Each difficult interaction is a chance to learn and do better next time. 6. Reinforce positive change. When you do manage to break a pattern, even in a small way, celebrate it. Notice how it feels. Often, choosing authenticity and calm assertiveness feels empowering and relieving. You might sense a weight off your chest when you finally tell a friend the truth you've been holding back, or pride when you remain composed during a provocation and later realize the argument didn't escalate for once. These positive outcomes are fuel to keep you going. It's like tending a fire. Acknowledge the sparks of progress and gently blow on them. Over time, those sparks of healthy interaction will grow into a steady warmth in your relationships. Throughout all these steps, Stoic principles can be a helpful guide. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the importance of focusing on one's own moral choice and letting go of the rest. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, he wrote. In our context, be genuine, be compassionate, be the adult in the room. You can't control whether others play fair, but you can uphold your own standard of integrity. This mindset not only breaks cycles of games, but also inspires others by example. Often, when one person consistently opts for honesty and empathy, it encourages the other to drop their guard as well. Breaking long-established games may take patience. Some relationships might transform, others might fade if they were only sustained by the games. But what remains, and what forms anew, will be more fulfilling. You'll start to notice that interactions don't exhaust you as much, because you're not expending energy on hidden agendas or second-guessing what things really mean. Instead, you're more often in the flow of sincere dialogue or healthy debate. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, famous for the concept of flow, noted that people are happiest when fully engaged in a meaningful task or conversation. Authentic interactions can create that satisfying flow state in relationships, where time flies and you feel truly connected. Each time you break a small cycle, even just responding differently once, you're rewiring the relationship dynamic and, importantly, your own expectations. You prove to yourself it can be different. That is immensely empowering. It's like stepping off a well-worn path into a new adventure that you choose. Here we are, back around the campfire, reflecting on the journey we've taken together. We started with a simple yet profound question. Why do some relationships uplift us while others leave us drained? In exploring Eric Berne's Games People Play, we found some answers. We learned that many of those draining interactions aren't random at all. They're structured by hidden games we fall into, often without realizing. We saw how our past shapes these patterns, with our internal parent, adult, and child taking turns in the conversation. By recognizing who's speaking, whether it's the wise adult or the wounded child, we gain the power to change the conversation. We discussed the courage it takes to choose authenticity over comfort, to be real rather than to play a role. And we outlined how, with awareness, honesty, and empathy, we can break free from old cycles and create relationships that are based on understanding and genuine care. Take a moment to feel the warmth of what all this means. It means that you are not stuck or helpless in the face of difficult relationship patterns. You have the tools to understand them and the freedom to change them. Every relationship is a two-way street, and by changing your approach, by refusing to play the unhealthy game, you influence the whole dynamic. This is incredibly empowering. It might start just with you, internally, deciding, I'm going to respond differently. but that single candle of awareness can light up the whole room, inviting others to meet you in a more honest and kind place. As we sit here watching the embers, I invite you to reflect on your own relationships. What games have you noticed in your life? Perhaps you recognized one of the examples we talked about, or maybe a completely different pattern came to mind. How have your parent, adult, and child shown up today? And where could a bit more authenticity potentially transform a connection you care about? These are not one-time questions, but gentle guides to carry with you. The goal isn't to analyze every interaction to death. It's to gradually become more mindful and genuine, so that over time, playing games feels less and less attractive compared to the reward of real connection. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Feel free to share in the comments which insights resonated with you. Have you ever caught yourself in one of these games? How did it feel to step out of it, if you have? By sharing our stories, we all learn and feel a little less alone in these very human struggles. After all, we're all human here, warming our hands by the same fire of curiosity and growth. As our campfire talk comes to a close, let's leave with a final nugget of wisdom to keep us inspired. Eric Berne, through his work, ultimately encouraged awareness, spontaneity, and intimacy in life. In fact, he once wrote something beautiful worth remembering. For certain fortunate people, there is something which transcends all classifications of behavior, and that is awareness. Something which rises above the programming of the past, and that is spontaneity. And something that is more rewarding than games, and that is intimacy. May we all become those fortunate people he describes, cultivating awareness of ourselves, reclaiming the spontaneity of our true nature, and choosing the rich rewards of intimacy and authenticity over the scant winnings of hidden games. Thank you for sharing this time around the fire. Let's carry its light of understanding into our relationships and keep the conversation going.